Hey there, I'm Ashley, and this is New Day with Ashley. If you're looking for inspiration to make a difference and create lasting impact, then you're in the right place. Get ready to be encouraged by the stories of my guests who have taken risks, overcome challenges, and created opportunities. It's time to make the most of your new day. Passionate about all things focused around live events, my guest specialty is creating spectacular, one-of-a-kind experiences. These experiences merge audio, video, lighting, staging, the virtual and online realm, as well as custom scenery. Ken Kolstad is the owner of Livewire, a world-class corporate, concert, and theatrical event production company. Kent and his team are committed and dedicated to crafting the most successful events that create the best, most memorable experiences. Another challenge I was kind of wondering about was COVID.
Yeah.
I hate to talk about it still.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think for a lot of businesses, it either helped or hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there was like a blessing in disguise.
Yep.
So I'm just curious because all live events were gone.
Yep. I love talking about COVID,
Okay.
so you can feel free. It of course, on the onset, I'm sitting at home in my apartment at the time, and I'm, basically watching it unfold. It was a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
And in fact, even just a day prior to that, I was on the way to a client meeting in Minneapolis, and that client wound up canceling while I was halfway to Minneapolis. Right?
Sure.
They said, "Hey, we don't know about this coronavirus thing." It was an email to me,
Right.
and I think we should just probably postpone for now, or we can do a video call next week or
But
whatever.
I'm on my way.
Yeah, right. So before I even turned around, I think I was on Sauk Center or something like that. So before I even turned around, I pulled off to the side of the road, grabbed my laptop, and just wrote an email to all of our pending and confirmed clients at that point for upcoming events, and said, formatted the email really nicely. I mean, it looked like it came from a marketing firm, not from me. Just made it as pro as possible, and said, look, we'll support you in whatever way we can. So we had a feather in our cap prior to the pandemic starting. Okay. We had been working with a variety of different companies, most notably locally here, WEX and WEX Health, to produce company meetings on a national basis. As Evolution One had been bought out by WEX Inc. in Portland, Maine, they rebranded to WEX Health. They opened that major office in West Fargo. Right. And of course, they have many other offices all around the country. They have, of course, Portland, Maine, where they're based. They have Fargo, they have Minneapolis, they have Salt Lake City, Nashville, number of others. Oh. But those were the major locations that they wanted to network together to have an all-company meeting, and in some cases, some all-company celebrations as well. We worked on multiple events with them in this way. And they had been using WebEx, which prior to the pandemic, if anyone here used WebEx or anyone listening used WebEx, it was garbage. It was absolutely the worst video conferencing platform that was out there. I mean, of the bunch, and there weren't very many at that time either, right? Zoom was still relatively unknown, right. And Skype otherwise had been sort of the go-to, if you will, in that way. Teams wasn't even around yet. So anyway. They had been using WebEx, and it was just an awful experience, right? I mean, you had folks sitting in ballrooms in all these different locations with laptops at the front, and you saw somebody trying to mouse around on the laptop, and then a crowd of people behind them. In each location, there was nothing going on. And so they brought us in, and we put together a system that allowed each of these locations to interact in real time. So we sent crews to each of these locations, right? Just two-person crews in most cases. In some cases, a couple more folks, depending on the scale. But for example, at the time, Melissa Smith, the CEO in Portland, could say hello to Jeff Young, the manager in Fargo, and they could have a real-time conversation. Nice. Full HD, great audio quality, looked like a newscast, right? I mean, at that point, just like you'd watch CNN or something along those lines, where you see like a toolbox of different presenters, right? And then you see a full crowd in Fargo, and then you see a full crowd in Nashville, and people are applauding for the award winner in Portland and all that stuff, right? Yeah. So, I mean, just a really unique thing that honestly in the live event realm hadn't really happened. I mean, I'm sure it had, and I know that it had in some cases, but we're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars in those types of instances, whereas we came in, substantially lower than that with the technology that we had and the team that we had. So anyway, long and short, this led to, and among many other virtual events that we'd produced prior to that, we'd streamed plenty of, ballroom events here in town or other celebrations, that sort of thing, right? So we'd been doing a fair amount of streaming prior to this, but that particular instance really set us up for success on the front of the pandemic. So anyway, getting back to, I'm sitting on my couch in my apartment, the day after this hit, and I'm hearing about all this stuff on NPR and otherwise, okay, what are we going to do about this? I'm ready. Like, I'm looking at this like, okay, this is a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
Let's go. I start to put out some advertising along the lines of like, one-way and two-way streaming and what it is and what it does. And I'm thinking like, okay, maybe hopefully Monday or Tuesday we'll start to see some conversions on this, and folks will be able to just, dive in on streaming, right, and convert their events. We maybe won't do as well because it's less technology and less staffing overall, for our part in terms of, dollars and cents, right? But I'd still rather be doing that than nothing.
Right, than nothing.
So let's do that. So the way it went was that, I love Minnesota and North Dakota, but it took a solid like 6 months for our clientele to catch on that you could produce an event virtually and do so meaningfully.
Sure.
So a variety of us, and when I say a variety of us, I mean folks on my team, friends of mine, owners of other local organizations that are sort of in related industries here. We put our heads together and like, okay, what are we going to do that is meaningful for us in the meantime here while we just kind of wait this thing out. So we put together this concept called Live at Livewire. And so Live at Livewire was a live music concert streaming situation that we put together. And I mean, I describe it that way because it was fairly loose at the onset. It was basically a live streaming set of concerts where we supported local musicians and bands, that were also out of work, right? All the bars and all the venues, right, were canceling all their shows, so on and so forth. So all these musicians are out of work locally and regionally. So we utilized our warehouse. We actually utilized the loading dock in our warehouse and dressed it up with some lights, right?
Sure, because that was your new location.
Yep.
As of like 2018?
2018.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we had bands play on this loading dock and dressed it up and created this really great streaming series where folks could donate to a GoFundMe for each instance of Live at Livewire, right? And then the bands would split it.
Sure.
So we didn't make any money off of that. We had a plethora of really great sponsors that came on board, just to name a few: Network Center, 702 Communications. We had a couple of private donors as well that jumped in to support our team's work, right? And make sure that we could pay the bills.
Yeah.
But more than anything, it was really the intention was to support these artists at this same trying time. Same breath, what did it do for us? Of course, we found those sponsors that helped to support, our team and our overall work. But at the same time, it kept our team sharp. We got to experiment with a lot of the new streaming technologies that were really rapidly rolling out across Facebook and Microsoft and otherwise. And there again, set us up for success as we started to see actual events start to book again, whether they were virtual or otherwise. So, Live at Livewire is something that was really, really special for that period.
I remember that.
Yeah, good.
That was cool.
It was a lot of fun to put together. It was certainly its own set of stressors at times, but honestly, I would rather take that than nothing, right? So,
right. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to put together. I think it was a great way for us to stay relevant at a really otherwise super difficult time to do so.
Right.
And helped us become known as a leader in streaming and virtual events as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I said, I love talking about the pandemic in that way.
Yeah.
So
and rightfully so. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity that came.
For sure.
And
it was a good opportunity for our team to, to stay creative, stay sharp, and, again, support the community in at least one way that we found a way to do so at that time. So,
and probably open the doors for some of these other virtual type corporate meetings that are going on and different things too, to show your capabilities of like, we can do things like this.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, for those clients that, were maybe a little more white knuckled at the wheel, how do we get through this? What are we going to do about this? That sort of thing. For those clientele, in our catalog of clients, I think that this was a really meaningful way for them to see that we could do this, well, right? And that it could be meaningful for the viewer at home and that it could have an impact overall too. So, I think it was a good way for those folks to see that, not all is lost if you have to pivot to a virtual event. And the same holds true today.
Yeah.
So,
let's talk about culture, company culture a little bit.
Yeah.
You guys kind of have a unique culture, I believe.
Yeah.
And is that something that you've set, that, you as the owner, did you kind of set that, pave the way for, when you're hiring people and bringing people on of like, what is allowed or what you expect?
I would say if you're asking me, well, let me put it this way. I took Livewire full time partially because I also wanted to have fun doing it.
Sure.
Right? There was a big element of, again, there's an element of risk taking with that and finding new ways to be more creative and new ways to implement events, whether that's using the same technologies or new technologies otherwise, like we discussed before. I think that was an element. I think that there was an element of wanting to create a process of event planning for ourselves internally and for our clients that was enjoyable, right? And that was kind of like what I mentioned before, where it's like, oh, hey, great to see you again, so-and-so, and as opposed to just having it feel like work and be really dry in the process, if that makes sense. I think on the flip side of that, my expectations are very much in line with, what I mentioned prior on corporate, sort of working along the lines of a larger corporation, right? We have, results that we have to deliver for our clients. One thing that we say very often around the organization is that we have to do it right the first time. In live events, you hear a lot of,
Right.
you hear in the corporate presentation realm, you hear a lot of fail forward. Okay, yeah, we fail forward, but I mean, we don't really get a second chance when, a product launch goes wrong or something like that, right? So we have to make sure we rehearse, we check, we double check, we verify, right? And I would say that as a result of that, right, and knowing that we have to do it right the first time, yeah, it can be a little bit more high strung in some cases, right? It can be a little bit more rigid in that way, but that's not a bad thing, right? That helps us maintain that quality and maintain that standard across our client base, which is sort of our paramount goal, right? We want to make sure that we are delivering the same quality across all of our events, no matter what size, no matter where it's located,
Sure.
all that. So I think that I think that our staff would tell you that it's probably a little more rigid than it needs to be. I think that in the same breath, we all know that that needs to exist.
That's what's
that
required.
What we do, right? And we are all professionals in the industry. One thing again that I should just go back to and mention is that I'm really grateful for the amazing 32 people that we have on our team right now. Right. The vast majority of them have special training in this. The vast majority of them know this industry really well. So it's not like I have to coach a lot of that into them either. It's just sort of known that this is what we have to do today. This is what we need to deliver on. Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's cool too when they can have that same expectation for themselves in their roles and just in the passion behind it, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a strong sense of ownership, I think, across the organization too. I think everybody understands that their role is mission critical. And, even if it's, I don't want to say even if it's setting up pipe and drape, because pipe and drape is one of our most important offerings.
Right.
But, it sometimes feels
when that goes down, I mean,
Right. You're looking at a beige wall in another ballroom.
Right.
Just like any other day of the week. So. Every little piece of what we do makes a big impact to the final product. And I think, again, there's a big shared sense of ownership across the team on that front, for sure. So
how many events are you guys doing annually?
We just did a count, and we are around the 720 mark annually. Wow. Yeah. And that's over the last few years, per year on a sort of average basis, if you will.
Okay.
It's tough for us to sometimes count exact, only because sometimes there's rentals, there's things that,
Sure.
we're kind of involved with, but not. But yeah, we're averaging 720 right now.
Wow.
So,
that's
very
incredible.
Exciting. Very, very grateful for that, for sure.
Do you have a favorite event that you've gotten to do or be a part of?
A favorite event, boy. It's like dropping the wallet of photos and trying to say this is my favorite kid.
Yeah.
I don't really have a favorite, to be totally honest. I think some of my favorites that I've had the ability to work on over the years are those that have a really deep-seated history, right? The ones that we turn on their head and, say, this is the new way of doing X, right? And that may be, with a client that we worked with for years, or maybe with a client that, has worked up with another company for years, that sort of thing. Sure. And those moments that we can create a new experience and something that's meaningful for whether it's the event planner or the audience or both, those are some of my favorite takeaways, I think, overall.
Yeah. Like that Minneapolis one that sounded... Was it a nonprofit? You said with
the
new technology. Table mapping. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
That sounds like
No, the table mapping was a great example of that. Absolutely. That was something where it didn't necessarily gain the traction that we anticipated it might. We haven't done it a whole lot. We've done, like I said, some instances of it since that point as well, on smaller scales. But in the same breath, it was a great demonstration that, if you have an idea, we can bring that to life. We can find a way to make it happen, right?
Yeah.
I think that, historically speaking, a lot of event planners, particularly of a, 70s, 80s vintage, if you will, maybe we'll just throw some things out the door right away. They don't even consider them, right?
No fog machine.
No knock to anyone when I say that. But we are willing to take those risks. We are willing to be more creative, and those types of moments that we created for exactly that table mapping project, right? When the ask was made on stage for folks to, open their hearts and potentially give to that organization, and you saw photos of these impacted families flying onto the tables.
Oh man, wow!
I mean, that was tearjerker
impactful,
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you aren't just doing stuff local. I mean, it's regional, but then, like you mentioned, like Portland and
absolutely
all different states.
And, one of the biggest advantages that we have being in Fargo-Moorhead is that we're centrally located. So, of course, there's the cost of doing business overall substantially lower in this area. So there again, we're coming in as a major advantage to, a great example would be Amazon. In July, we were in Miami at the Intercontinental Hotel, producing a fairly basic ballroom show, all things considered. A couple of screens, a nice little backdrop, some pipe and drape, that sort of thing. But I think we came in at something like $250,000 cheaper than the next competitor they got a bid from locally. So pretty substantial difference overall.
Yeah.
And, we want to be an advantage to every client that we serve, whether that's here in Fargo-Moorhead or the region or nationally. So, and frankly, as a result of being here and as a result of, being able to be nimble, as I mentioned before, we can do that, right? We have an opportunity to do that. So,
I want to talk a little bit about your mentors.
Sure.
You've had a lot of mentors.
Yeah.
Any advice that they've given you that's really stuck with you?
Sure. I think probably the biggest piece of advice that's impacted my day-to-day at Livewire is, and this will sound a little cliche on the front end, is to consider that everybody's fighting a battle that you know nothing about, right? And you maybe didn't expect me to say that from a business perspective.
Right, yeah.
But it's absolutely true, right? Live events are super last minute. They can be very stressful. They can be, last minute changes, last minute in general, right? In terms of the booking in some cases, right? It might be a press conference that's come up tomorrow, right? Whatever the case is. There might be, a set of changes. This person can't make it now, so now we have to do virtual XYZ, so on and so forth, right? So we're used to that. But in the same breath, we also acknowledge that our team has lives outside of Livewire. I have a life outside of Livewire, if you can believe it.
Right, yeah.
Our clients have a life outside of Livewire, and so do their audiences, right? So that's something that I apply every day in terms of how we're interacting with folks and how I'm interacting with our clients or with our team or otherwise. This, shouldn't necessarily be, I hope it's, among their top priorities, but I don't expect it to be their first priority by any means. And taking that sort of social perspective of everybody that I interact with, whether, again, that be our team or that might be a new prospective client or a client that I've worked with for 10 years or their audiences or otherwise, or somebody that's working at the venue setting chairs, doesn't matter who it is, right?
Yeah.
Everybody else has something going on, right? And, that might be a great challenge. It might be something great in their life otherwise, right? Maybe a blessing or a curse, TBD. We don't know, right? So taking that into consideration, I think, has been probably the biggest asset to helping the company grow, right? Sort of being thoughtful about where people are coming in at.
Right.
So,
Wow, what a great episode. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always so inspiring sharing these stories. To listen to the full podcast, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. Remember to like and subscribe. I would love if you could leave me a 5-star review. This helps us reach and engage with more people. Join me next week, and until then, make the most of your new day.